So when I tell people that I car share, frequently people ask me, how much does it cost? And that's a tricky question to answer sometimes. So I would recommend that you check out my other video about the different costs of Modo and just how the whole system works. But to kind of follow on from there, I wanted to just show a real world example of an actual trip that I recently took. This was in January 2023. I drove from my home in Vancouver, BC to Whistler, and it was a 4-day trip. We went skiing, and it's the kind of thing that Modo is really good for. This was, in fact, the only trip I took in January. As I've said before, my family and I live a very car-light lifestyle. We bike pretty much everywhere in the city, and we're fortunate to live very close to a major transit hub. That said, Vancouver, like many North American cities, is still highly car-centric, and that means for some trips, transit and bus have serious limitations. For Whistler, you can go by bus, you can go by car, and there used to be an excellent train service, but that was axed a couple of decades ago under the BC Liberal government, leaving only the super expensive luxury tourist train, which doesn't do round trips to Whistler. So there's no train option. I'm going to compare the cost of going Vancouver to Whistler in a shared Modo car versus the cost of going by transit and bus, because there is a bus that goes up there, and it's not bad. I thought it would be useful to compare the actual price I paid for the trip versus the price that Modo's trip calculator gives me, just to see how close it comes. The trip calculator, which you can find on the Modo website, is a handy tool for working out the full cost of any trip that you're going to make, or in this case have made. So a forewarning, there's going to be a lot of numbers, but that's the only way I can do this breakdown properly. First thing is to book the car. You can do this through the Modo app, by phone, or on the website. I usually go through the website. When I log in, I typically go to my favorite vehicles in my neighborhood. These are the starred locations on the map. For this trip, I knew what I wanted. I wanted a big car, enough for the 3 of us and all our ski gear and luggage. But I didn't want to pay extra for an SUV or minivan, just the basic rate, or what Modo calls daily drives. I also wanted a vehicle with snow tires. Around a quarter of Modo's fleet have heavy-duty winter tires. Most of Modo's vehicles actually have M&S tires, mud and snow tires. That's what the M&S stands for, which are good for snow, but not necessarily for heavy snow on unplowed roads. And when on a longer trip like this to the mountain, I wanted the snow tires for peace of mind. So this one I know has winter tires, and it was available. It's an Elantra, 2018 Hyundai Elantra. I've used it before. It's a utilitarian model, a family saloon that seats 5 and is spacey inside with a good-sized trunk. This particular car is an older car by Modo standards, 2018. One of the great things about driving with Modo is that the cars are often just 1 or 2 years old or 3 years old. Because they're getting so much use, there's a high turnover of vehicles. Okay, that's the car. So here we are on the Modo homepage. I'm going to look at the basic breakdown of the prices again. It's $4 an hour, up to a maximum of $48 per day. So you never pay for more than 12 hours. That's with the Modo Plus membership. If you've paid for a share, there's $500 for a share, which you get back when you leave the co-op. If you're just paying on a monthly basis, it's a different rate. This is the rate here, $5, $60 max per 24 hours. On top of that, you pay the distance fee. Remember, Modo is a combination of the hourly rate and the distance fee. You don't pay for insurance and you don't pay for gas and maintenance of the car, of course. But you do pay these two rates, hours and distance. And the distance is worked out by kilometer. So for the 40 cents for the first 25 kilometers is what you pay, which is $10, and then 28 cents per kilometer thereafter. So on a 50-kilometer trip, you pay $10 for the first 25, $7 for the second 25, $17 for a 50-kilometer trip. But I just wanted to highlight for this particular trip, for this trip to Whistler, this feature of Modo. It's like a special day tripper rate you get, and you pay $90 per day, and within that rate you get 250 kilometers for each 24 hours of the day tripper at the day tripper rate, which is basically a trip to Whistler and back, because Whistler is about 125 kilometers away. So that's a nice feature. So those are the breakdown of costs, and we're going to go over to the trip calculator now. So we're back on the Modo homepage. Under how it works, go to trip calculator. This is a really useful tool if you want to just get an idea of how much a particular trip is going to cost you. I'm a paid up member, so I'm just going to choose this tab. If you were going monthly business, that's where you would go there. The Elantra is a daily drive vehicle, so it fits into the basic rate tier for hourly rate. That's $4. But if I was going with a bigger group of people, I might take a minivan, which falls under large and loadable, or maybe I would want an SUV, or perhaps it was a different kind of job where I needed to use a pickup truck, and that's under large and loadable. They pay a little bit more. And then the next level up is for cargo vans and higher end vehicles, and that's where you pay the most, but it's useful for lugging furniture around or something like that. The trip calculator won't do trips in the past, but I'll choose an equivalent trip in the future to get the same calculation. We were leaving Vancouver early in the morning on the Sunday, and we were coming back in the evening on Wednesday. As we wanted to leave really early, on the Sunday, I picked up the car on the Saturday evening at 10 o'clock, and we went all the way to Wednesday, skied in the whole day, and then returned in the evening. So pick up 22. Return was going to be, I thought 10 o'clock, but in the end I returned it early. It didn't make any difference because it was over 12 hours when I returned it, so it's the same price as 10 o'clock, but I returned it at 7:15. See from the invoice, started at 10 o'clock, returned January 18, 7:15, and I drove 306 kilometers. 306 kilometers, I'll put that in here. I budgeted for 300, so that was pretty close. Whistler's very predictable. It's 125 kilometers away, so 250 plus driving around in Whistler, back and forth from the ski slope to accommodation. That was another 50. So the actual price I paid was, in total, was $290.09. And if we click submit on the trip calculator, the price is $295.41. And the reason that there's a difference here, 295.41 versus 290, is the fuel surcharge. Every time the price of gas rises above $1.60 per litre, Modo adds this surcharge. And like the price of gas, it can fluctuate quite a bit. It's not a huge amount on short trips. Like you can see, between January 1st, 2023 to January 6th, it was a 1/10 of a cent per kilometer. And then it went up between the 6th and the 20th of January to 0.72 cents, so not even a full cent per kilometer. And then it actually went over a cent per kilometer between January 20th and January 31st to 1.36 cents per kilometer. And the current rate you can see on this page on Modo is for February is here. It's 2.27 cents per kilometer. So it's changed. It's quite variable. So all the fees and charges are included in the trip calculator, but not all of them are displayed on the web page as a line item. And I can see why they do that. I think it's just made to make it easier to read and to use. I mean, this is going to be the first thing that people come to if they're checking on how much it costs to do Modo. They're interested in Modo. So I can see that they just want to make it easier on the eye. But at the same time, all those prices are not being shown, but they are actually under the hood, so to speak. And the price that you get, aside from the fluctuations in the fuel surcharge, is what you will pay and what was shown on the invoice. The only difference I had on my invoice was the fuel surcharge difference, and it was a few dollars less rather than more because the price of gas went up since I made my trip. One other fee or tax that doesn't appear on the trip calculator, but that appears on my invoice, is the PVRT. And that is a tax that is charged on trips of over 8 hours for every 24 hours. So I went for 4 days, I paid $6. It's a British Columbia tax, and the federal government then raises a GST on that BC tax. It's a tax upon a tax. One other line item on the calculator and also on my invoice is the co-op innovation fee. And this is a flat fee that you pay of $1.50 for every trip. Modo describes this as a fee that covers costs associated with growing the co-op and improving the overall member experience. That includes upgrading software and systems, deployment of vehicles in new geographies and neighborhoods, introducing new mobility concepts, and generally ensuring Modo remains relevant and future-proof. So in practice, I don't know exactly how that works out, but it's another fee you have to pay every time. And hopefully it's going towards lots of improvements in the co-op. So when all's said and done, the trip calculator and the invoice tally pretty much on everything apart from the distance. And obviously the GST and the PST will reflect those changes, those differences. The difference actually is $5.32 when you take into account the $4.75 difference in distance and the more or less 50 cents extra in GST and PST. The trip calculator and the invoice are exactly the same where it comes to hours, like $234 for the time. That's $90 for the day tripper rate, plus 3 days at $48. There's also the PVRT, $6, the innovation fee, $1.50 every time, and that's it. So the trip calculator does a good job. Just remember that the fuel surcharge is going to be changing all the time.